what you're dealing with is a huge increase in living costs, which you didn't actually have during the pandemic. In some cases, living costs went down. And it was good enough then, but for some reason it's not good enough now. I think it was a really strange decision when you knew rising living costs were coming down the track to take that money away from people who are, by definition, those on the lowest incomes.
I suppose the argument would be, well, it was never meant to be a long-term measure. We hadn't factored it into the budgets moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you look at the situation we're in now, the government's still doing things, but they're just not. They've taken money out of universal credit and giving it back in other ways. And I think the question you have to ask is, what's the best way to get the money to people that need it the most? So we've got this new scheme around council tax rebates. We work a lot with local authorities, and they're having to essentially come up with a new scheme in a very short space of time when you've got a mechanism that could get the money to people much faster. So it's just about what's the best way of doing things.
Yeah, we've had so many people already getting in touch saying they've got better ideas than the government actually at the moment for doing something about it. It's interesting if you look at one of the front pages that talks about. There's that one that was the Mirror, wasn't it? It's April Cruel Day. It's all very well for Rishi Sunak to say, you know, the changes that we had to make during the pandemic were only ever temporary. But the government also knew that all of these things were going to build up, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they've allowed it to happen almost on one day.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge shock, and it's not just one day. I was doing some numbers, and over the last decade, you've seen for every £1 you get in benefits, it's gone up by 15 pence. But cost of living has gone up by 30 pence. And even wages on average have only gone up by 27, 26, 25 pence in the pound. So you're actually, for every £1 you earn, you're 5 pence worse off, even if you're working on average. And I'd say that affects the lower income households much more. So, yeah, it's not just what's happening today. If you look at the last decade, people are on average worse off. And I think what the government has to do is find ways to grow the economy. I know we've had a pandemic, we had a financial crisis. We need to be able to come out of that really, really strongly.
So how do we do that? How do we grow the economy? Because is that a case of actually spending more? Yeah,
building your way out of a depression.
I think you can. Well, I think you have to a little bit, right? Because you're in this situation now where just people aren't going to be able to make ends meet. What's the point in the government if they're not going to be able to protect people from that? We're coming out of a pandemic. The government was spending quite freely during the pandemic. For some reason, it feels like now's the time to draw back. It doesn't feel like it is the right time to me, and it doesn't feel like it's the right time to the people on the doorstep